Okay, very good. Good morning and welcome. This is another edition of our Family Faith Formation. This is the purpose of Family Faith Formation is to give our families who have young children, the tools and the opportunity to pass the faith on to the next generation. I have a special guest here this morning, Michael Jordan, not that Michael Jordan, our Michael Jordan, who is going to give us a presentation on some of the things that he grew up with here at Our Savior's Lutheran Church. And Michael has had a very wonderful ministry. He's served as a youth director, and he's going to share with us some of the wonderful things that can happen when you take an adventure trip, like with canoes or wherever that adventure might take one, that you can really kind of shape your faith and have a wonderful understanding of God and creation and working together and all of the wonderful things about Christian discipleship out in the great outdoors. So, and Michael is soon to be ordained. He's being voted on, I think, as we speak. But I think that vote's going to be pretty much unanimous. He's going to, well, I'll let him tell his story about where he'll be serving very shortly as an ordained Lutheran ELCA pastor. So, we anticipate that there's all sorts of people on that live stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's going to go virtual, especially since they found out that you're speaking here today. So, all right, let's give a nice warm welcome to Michael. Okay. Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and the presentation here.
I will. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael. As Pastor Kevin alluded to, I grew up in this congregation. I graduated from Hibbing High School back in 2008. So I'm a little bit older than most of you here. Thank you guys so much for being here, though, for Family Faith Formation. Having these opportunities to go more in depth with your faith, having a deeper dive is so great. So one of the things Pastor Kevin shared is that I've had a lot of experiences. And so one of the big things growing up here, I should just turn around for a quick sec. There we go. Is going to camp. Raise your hand if you've ever been to Camp Hiawatha or Camp Vermilion before, or even if you've spent a night away from your home, anytime like that before. Yes, most of us have, in some way, shape, or form, whether it was even just going to a grandparent's house, but there's something unique about going up to camp. I'm going to take this off, I think, because it keeps hitting the microphone, if that's okay. Yep. Thank you. There we go. And so going off to camp, there was nothing quite like it. And so as a kid, my first time I ever went to Camp Vermilion was when I think I was like in first grade. I went with my parents in the wintertime, and we went sledding down Hamburger Hill. If you've never been there before, it's this huge hill that goes all the way down to the lake. We would go inner tubing, and then there was two paths at the very bottom that you could diverge either to the left or to the right. A lot of times we wouldn't be able to turn quick enough, and we'd go crashing into the trees and have an abrupt stop. But it was always great. And the idea behind that was to create a smaller community here at Our Savior's, have some friends to grow up around, and have these memories and experiences. Because for me, every time I went to camp, it was like a mountaintop experience. Nothing ever really compared to it. I grew up going to camp then as a camper. Many, many summers I went there for the week-long programs. During my first 2 years of college, I was on staff at Voyagers Lutheran Ministry, being able to be a camp counselor. Still to this day, my first summer on staff there is probably one of my all-time favorite summers. And then after I graduated, I got a job at Roseville Lutheran Church in the Twin Cities, working as a youth director. So Roseville is a little bit larger congregation than Our Savior's, even when I grew up here. And so they were able to hire me there to work at the church and kind of do what I'm doing here right now. Teaching confirmation, teaching high school ministry. Most of my time at Roseville was working with high school youth. And one of the big things that we would do each and every summer when I was a youth director was go on a Boundary Waters trip. It was the last week of this, usually the last trip I would go on. We'd go into the wilderness, spend a week canoeing through God's great creation. So this is me, my first year in youth ministry, actually some of my high school youth that were part of my high school youth leadership team. If you've been to camp in the past 10 years, you've probably seen the guy on the very far right-hand side. His name is Brian. He was a good friend of mine. He grew up, we worked on camp staff together, and then he also grew up at Roseville. And so it was a great connection because he was also able to recruit more youth to come. Because the idea is this is a growing experience. You guys are here on Sundays in Family Faith Formation, here online as well. It's not just a one-off thing. You don't just do it once and then you have it all figured out, you learn everything, but it's a growing experience. Each summer I'd go back to camp, I'd learn something new, build new friendships, build upon old friendships, and get to go grow deeper in my faith with Jesus Christ. And as a youth director, that's what I wanted to pass on to all the youth that I got to see as well, bringing them up to camp, whether it was our week-long camp at Camp Hiawatha or going into the Boundary Waters through Camp Vermilion. They were great experiences. But as Pastor Kevin said, he wanted me to specifically talk this morning about the Boundary Waters, these wilderness experiences. And there is truly, for me, nothing quite like it, to be able to see Jesus in creation. So all the pictures this morning came from various trips that I either took up to Camp Hiawatha or to the Boundary Waters. This was the first trip that I went on with my youth group. This is coming out of Nina Moose. If you're familiar with the Boundary Waters, it's coming out of Nina Moose. There's a place called On Top of the World. As you're coming out of the river, you're able to climb up a little cliff, and then you literally have this picturesque view of the entire Boundary Waters. And so when you go to the Boundary Waters trip like this, God does a lot of the heavy lifting. A lot of times in youth ministry, like here for Family Faith Formation, Kevin has to prep a lesson. When you're in the wilderness like this, a lot of times it's just a good chance to pause, to slow down, and to take it all in. Because after you've spent an entire week paddling and portaging through creation, just to pause here and reflect back on the entire trip and see this amazing landscape. There's nothing quite like it. And part of that is, I think, because of the simplicity, but also because we're working really hard. And so every trip that you take into the Boundary Waters, there's 9 people. Part of that is because they want to make sure it stays quiet, it stays picturesque, it stays peaceful. So you're limited to only 9 people in a canoe group, and when you go through Voyagers Lutheran Ministry, you have an adult leader. Usually that would be me. You'd have a canoe guide. So if you know the Redbirds, John was one of the guys playing the guitar this morning. The person in the very front, that's his oldest daughter, Christy. She was a canoe guide for one of my trips. And then you have 7 other people. So the 9 of us, we plot a route. We decide where we're going to go, what we want to see, what we want to do. But also understanding that even with the best laid plans, when you're in the wilderness, you're also at the mercy of creation. You're at the mercy of what's going to happen. Sometimes the weather goes differently than what you expected. There's a huge storm, so you have a layover day instead of being able to paddle really far. Some days it's really nice, and instead of paddling all day, you just want to swim in the lake. But the idea is you're on God's time. When you're hungry, you eat. When you're tired, you sleep. When you're ready to wake up, you get up. You don't bring a clock into the wilderness. You just set a path and decide together how you want to grow together in relationships with one another and in creation. And one of the things about the Boundary Waters is everything is just better. Like food literally tastes better in the Boundary Waters. I think it's partly because you work so hard for it. But like pizza like that we would cook over the fire on a griddle like that, usually the crust would be burned underneath it, and yet it was so much better than pizza you could get here. Those blueberries, truly fresh blueberries that we would be able to pick in the wilderness. And that thing right down there that looks actually kind of disgusting if you just see a picture of it, it's called a Mary Bar. It is like packed with peanut butter and sugar and honey, and it is like a boost of energy partway through the day. And things like that is just, you're able to find more joy, more happiness when you're in the wilderness like this than usually you could just at home, where you eat your 3 meals a day or whatever. You know you're going to have cereal or something in the morning, and then at nighttime you're going to have that hot meal. We have a hot meal in the Boundary Waters too, but it's just better. After you've been breathing in the fresh air, after you've been seeing all these amazing sights, these deep conversations, and then, just really good food that nourishes your body. And because you have time in the Boundary Waters, you can take time. How many of you have ever made a s'more before? Most of us have made a s'more in our life. How many of you have no patience and you just shove that marshmallow right in the fire, burn it right away because you just want to eat it and be ready to go? One of us, thank you for being honest. I appreciate that. I am not a s'more fan usually, and so I don't. You like to burn it. That's even better. I love that. So a lot of times, though, because you have that time when you're in the wilderness, you're in no hurry. You can take that time to get the perfect s'more, exactly how you want it, whether it's burned or perfectly golden all around. Melt the chocolate as soon as you smash it between the 2 graham cracker crusts. And then, of course, as you see Kate Ma's here, because it was such a perfect s'more, she even put her pinkies out, because it's something fine. But the idea is we don't slow down in our lives. Parents, you probably can attest to this better than maybe your kids can, but we're so busy. We are so absolutely busy. Our lives are structured. We're just going. And sometimes we go through the motions so much that we just miss these moments, these opportunities that God is saying, just be with me. Slow down. And when you're in the Boundary Waters, you don't have a schedule. You don't have a clock. You get to just be. So you get to take the time to make that s'more however you want it to be. And even if things don't go exactly according to plan, it's still great. Even if you do burn that marshmallow and you're not happy about it and you're upset, it still is going to taste better because you're in the wilderness. And even if you're waiting for that pot of water to boil and it seems to be taking longer than ever because you're doing it using a fire instead of an electric or a gas stove, you have that beautiful wilderness landscape that you get to look at while you're waiting there. And like I mentioned earlier on, part of the reason why the Boundary Waters trips for me were so great was because of the simplicity of it. When you're getting ready to go into the Boundary Waters, you're taking the very few things you need because you are going to carry it all. You have to paddle it in the canoes and carry it on your backs when you go in between two lakes. And so you have to be very mindful of what you're bringing. Now, it's a little bit less intense than what Jesus was doing for his first disciples. So today, if you were at worship, you heard this story about Jesus going back to his hometown. The same story appears in Mark's gospel, but Mark immediately, like Mark loves to do in his gospel, immediately moves into the next thing. And the thing he mentions is he sends his disciples off saying all they can take is a walking stick and not even a change of clothes. Boundary Waters is a little bit better than that. You do get to bring a second pair of clothes. But usually when you go on a vacation, don't you pack a new outfit for each and every day when you go somewhere? Yeah. In the Boundary Waters, you have two clothes. One that's going to get wet and one that's going to stay dry. That's all you take. Because you don't want to bring too much weight. You don't bring your cell phone into the Boundary Waters. You don't bring a laptop or an iPad. You don't bring all of your video stuff, a laptop. You don't bring things so you can watch Netflix. Because your TV, your entertainment is creation. It's being able to just take in all of these things. These things that literally we had no effect on. God just made this creation. We get to take this in. And then when we do that, we're able to experience God in new ways. One of the things is when we go on these Boundary Waters trips, I loved to help the youth remember that God is there, Jesus is there every day. From sunrise to sunset with these beautiful sunsets that looks like someone literally painted that, and you have that perfect bolt of light shooting across the sky. You couldn't create that. We can't create that, but we get to take that in by slowing down, taking in these moments to see God there every day, from the morning to the sunset, even while we're sleeping. Jesus is there. And then Jesus is there everywhere. Every single moment that we're in the Boundary Waters, there's an opportunity to take that in. We're very mindful of that in the Boundary Waters, whether it's being fun with a piece of tortilla bread that you're supposed to use for your lunch, but you want to just take that time and chop it up into a nice snowflake, seeing a loon with its babies, being able to see the pictographs in the Boundary Waters, ancient drawings that bring you back understanding that, yes, we are part of a larger narrative, that there are people all around this world that we are a part of, that we get to be part of this history too. Or just taking that moment to reflect, looking out over the lake, having that quiet time. Maybe you don't want to have quiet time. Maybe you're like, I love talking. I need energy. I need excitement. I need people to talk to. Solitude is not for me. But a lot of times, those that need solitude or want solitude can't find it here in our world today. There's too many distractions. I've been at home now for the past couple of weeks, and I think we can't go an hour without one of our phones dinging or buzzing or going off. There's always distractions. But when you're in the Boundary Waters, you don't have that. Your phone doesn't get service. If you brought your cell phone, I had one youth one time sneak a cell phone into the Boundary Waters, and they were so mad that they didn't get any cell phone reception. And it was like, we told you. Did you not believe us? But the idea was it's intentional to be able to unplug in so many different ways and plug in to a greater source, and that's Jesus Christ, because we get to see that Jesus is there everywhere. But most importantly for me is that Jesus is there in every relationship. One of my favorite parts of the Boundary Waters is the conversations. So I'd usually go with high school students, so we'd be a little bit older than probably most of you watching online and here today. But still, the conversations are the most important thing, because we get to know each other better. And maybe right now you share everything with your parents, you share everything with your friends. When you get to high school, a lot of times you don't share everything. You start to keep some secrets. You start to not always open up. But after spending a whole week together, if all you do is be quiet, it's going to be a really, really quiet trip, because you've got to talk to each other. And it's in those conversations when you get to a campsite early and set up and everyone's sitting in their hammocks or just sitting around the fire or maybe laying on a rock basking in the sun, conversations start to spark up. And maybe you're not fully talking about Jesus specifically, but it's in those relationships, talking about the struggles you're having in life, talking about the friends that maybe fell away, talking about something you're worried about, someone you didn't see all summer, and you're worried about what it's going to be like when school starts again that fall. It's those moments to start breaking in to talk about maybe what Jesus could be doing in that relationship, how you could start to see someone else differently. Maybe a conflict you had with your best friend that's no longer your best friend, we can start to help you see and understand your role in that and how to seek reconciliation with them. And so yes, the big part of the Boundary Waters is paddling. You're on a lake. How many of you have ever paddled in a canoe before? Some of you have? Yeah. So mainly all you're doing, especially if you're in the front, you're just doing these huge power strokes because you are what makes the canoe go. And that's how you get from point A to point B in the Boundary Waters. You're not going to see a lot if you don't paddle, which some of my youth were not excited about because they wanted to see a lot but didn't want to put the arm effort in to actually get somewhere. But yes, you're paddling. And a lot of times, one of the things I love about Camp Vermilion is especially if you have a group of 9, they want you to send you out in 3 canoes because then you have 3 people to have that conversation with, you and 2 others. And while you're in that canoe, yes, sometimes I just sit there and it's quiet and just taking in all the nature around me, but you get to have those deeper conversations. You get to know people way more. In this 10 minutes that I'm going to be here, we're not going to get to know each other that well. But in one full week in the wilderness, you get to have these great conversations. You get to pause sometimes and be like, oh, look at that moose, or look at that duck, or look at that beaver off to the side. In those split-second moments that if you blink, you might miss it. But you get to see God in those things. You get to know these people even better, because some of these youth didn't show up throughout the entire year, but they would want to come on a wilderness experience like this. And in a week, I'd get to learn more about all of them than I could in an entire year, because we're together for that intense period of time. Like I said, it's a mountaintop experience when you go into the wilderness. And I just put this in here because sometimes you get to take a break even while you're paddling, because you do get tired. I'm the guy in the back. I'm not trying to say I was the best paddler always, because that's not really paddling when you're laying back like that. It doesn't work really well. I'm pretty sure this picture was taken when we were looking for a campsite, and I was like, well, I'm not going to be the one going in and seeing if this one's open. So we're just hanging out. But the idea is you're going to paddle. You're going to be with these people. However, the Boundary Waters is a chain of lakes. If you've never been there before, the lakes don't lead one into the other. What happens when you get to the end of one lake is you have to get out of your canoes, load everything up, and take all of your gear to the next spot. So that's why you also want to be very mindful about how much stuff you're bringing. Because if you bring too much stuff, you're going to be weighed down by that. You're going to miss the point of all the opportunities to take things in, because you're going to be focused on all this extra gear you have to carry. But the less you bring, the easier it is to do what is called portaging. So you're literally carrying all of your gear down a trail from one lake to the next, including the canoe. So if you see that person in the very front, that was one of my youth who literally was carrying it on their shoulders. That's how you carry a canoe. It's pretty heavy. Like these canoes, especially, camp has older canoes that weigh like 80 pounds, just resting on your shoulders, and it's kind of weird to balance it. But usually portaging is one of the best experiences for a lot of my youth to see themselves in a new way, to see themselves in a way that God can see them, because they get to discover new strength. This person in this picture, her name is Hannah. She hated the wilderness. When she first signed up to go on the Boundary Waters trip, I was surprised. I was astonished. I was flabbergasted. I had no idea why, because she hated bugs. She hated being dirty. She loved taking a shower every day. All of those things are the exact opposite when you go to the Boundary Waters, and yet she still signed up to go. And on our second to last day, we had like a 10-rod portage, which overall is a pretty short portage, but it was going straight up from one lake, elevation-wise, from one lake to the next. And she had yet to portage a canoe. She's like, all right, it's the shortest one. I want to try it. Now, Hannah, how tall are you, would you say? 4 feet? So she was probably about 6 inches taller than you. She was probably about 4'6", not much taller than you. And she's like, I'm going to try to portage a canoe. And so we helped her get it on her shoulders, and she was struggling first, like shaking a lot, trying to find her balance, but she did it. She carried it for those 10 rods, and then after accomplishing it, she was so excited. She was so empowered. She knew that she had this strength, and she was cheered on by all of us. But the idea is she tried something new. A lot of times we're afraid to step out, to try something new. And yet Jesus calls us to do that so many times. Jesus doesn't tell us to stay in our comfortable spots, because it's usually when we're a little bit uncomfortable that this deep growth can happen. Early on when I had that verse up there about the disciples being sent off with just a rod, not even a change of clothes, that had to be really scary. That had to be really uncomfortable. And yet it was for a greater thing. It was to prepare other people to experience Jesus Christ. And so when you have this strength like this, it allows you to get ready to experience Christ in a new way, to share that message with other people. And it's a victorious thing. You feel great afterwards. You feel like you are on top of the world. And there is nothing quite like it. So even with these mountaintop experiences, as Pastor Kevin wanted me to talk about today, these ways to experience Christ in new ways that you can't get just here in a church. You can't recreate this here. We could plant all these trees and put a huge mountain here and try to have a picturesque thing, but it wouldn't be the same. After spending a whole week paddling through the wilderness and then getting to climb on top of the world and look out over all the places you've been and then start to reflect on where you might be going is amazing. And even with these mountaintop experiences, though, I want to just remind you of the importance of being here too. Because while those mountaintop experiences, going to camp, going to the Boundary Waters, there's nothing like it. Gathering together in community. This is the youth group that I was a part of. This was the last Christmas that I had with them back in 2018. We all gathered together. Coming here for the 51 other weeks out of the year is even more important, I would say. Those mountaintop experiences absolutely can give you the memories, can give you the tools, can give you the excitement for what's coming next. But this is the plateau. This is the foundation that you can continue to build upon. Being here for family faith formation, whether you're online or here in person. Gathering together with the community, doing life together more intentionally is even better for the longer journey. It makes those experiences, when you do have those mountaintop times, when you literally climb a mountain and get to look over the Boundary Waters, when you get to do it with people that you've been journeying, learning more about Christ and each other with, makes it even more worth it. So just remember that even when you're not in the Boundary Waters, you can still experience God. You can still see Jesus every day, everywhere, and in every relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give him a nice round of applause.
Thank you.
Any questions for Michael? You saw a lot of pictures. Wonderful experiences.
Yeah.
What's your favorite lake?
What is my favorite lake? Oyster, probably. I really like Oyster. Yeah. Just a little bit more secluded, and yet there was a beautiful, beautiful campsite there we were once. Like literally, the bench that someone had, there was a huge tree that fell down, and so we even had like a back to our bench, which was great. Yeah, question for you. How did I like what? How do I like my marshmallows? So I've gotten to the point where I don't even like s'mores. So I like a deconstructed s'more, is what I like to say. So I just like to eat a handful of marshmallows, maybe one piece of chocolate, and then a graham cracker without putting any of them near the fire. So I just like the sugar high. That's what I go for. Yeah. Other questions? How many of you might want to go to the Boundary Waters if you've never been before? Maybe. You know, I appreciate that honesty. It is a weird trip. It is a weird experience. But those who go on it have stories to tell for generations. So, just a thought, but absolutely, it's good to be a little hesitant going in. I was nervous the first time I went to the Boundary Waters. I had no idea what I was fully getting into. So, question?
What was your favorite site while you were there?
My favorite campsite while I was there?
Like, the stuff you saw.
Yeah. Oh, the favorite thing I saw. Probably on top of the world. That's why I included it in there twice, because literally, most of the Boundary Waters, you're like in the thick of the Boundary Waters. And when you get on top of the world, you can kind of see the whole landscape of it all. And then, especially because for me, I always came out of Ninamoose, which is where you can hit on top of the world, so I'd be able to look back and kind of see everywhere I had been and reflect on that, but then also talk about when we were up there, I'd talk with the youth about what's going to be next. Because I don't want to leave all these experiences just in the Boundary Waters, but I want to take that with us and empower us to go do more when we get back home. Yeah.
Did you ever see any animals?
I did see some animals. I still have yet to see a moose or a bear. Bear I'm not that crazy about seeing, but a moose I would love to see at some point. Saw a lot of deer, saw a lot of squirrels and chipmunks, some birds, Lots of bald eagles, though, too. That was usually the best thing, especially if we had like an eagle-eyed observer that could literally point out an eagle, and I would be like paddling, and they're like, oh, look over there, up in the trees. And there'd be an eagle just like roosting up there, kind of looking around. And then one of the coolest ones was when it dive bombed. We thought it was coming right at us, but it got right near us and grabbed a fish right out of the water. So it was really cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once again, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. We'll sign off now. And just a reminder, with respect to family faith formation, the 4 keys as far as passing on the faith to our kids. Anybody remember them up here? Caring conversation is the first one. To get into some type of discipline as far as family devotions, reading those Bible storybooks, and having a conversation about that. The third key, as far as passing on the faith, is meaningful rituals and traditions. And you make that up. Maybe it's making the sign of the cross at bath time. I rather suspect when you were leading groups out here in the Boundary Waters, you had all sorts of rituals and traditions that you did. And then the fourth one, of course, is family service. And I would also interject not only family service to serve as a family, but also to have adventures like this that Michael kind of taught us, where we can kind of grow deeper together. So try to explore those kind of things. You know, if we have 1 hour of church, but you have 24 hours of living the faith, 7 days a week. So take that as seriously as your Lord invites you to through the covenant of your holy baptism. Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you were blessed by this experience, tell a friend. It sits there and lives on our Savior's Lutheran Church Facebook page. So we would love to have a lot of views after this has already taken place. Tell Grandpa, tell Grandma, tell your friends. All right. Let's close with the Lord's Prayer, shall we? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. God bless. Be well. We'll see you next week. And take care.